I want to sit with you, right here, for a long while, and talk as if we're two friends who have nothing else to do tonight except stare at the ceiling and speak the quiet, anxious truths we usually push aside. I'm going to talk about brain rot, not the cartoonish meme your little cousin flings at TikTok montages, but the slow, almost invisible erosion that millions of us are living through, an erosion that isn't etched into the DSM yet feels as real as a tension headache behind the eyes. I'll start with the texture of it, the way it feels on an ordinary Tuesday when you wake up, roll over, and the first thing your hand does before you've even checked the time is grope for the rectangle of glass on the nightstand. You unlock it without thinking, the way a fish opens its mouth in water. The screen blooms, a soft nuclear glow, and the reels begin their infinite tumble. 30 seconds later, you realize you've already forgotten why you picked the phone up. You had a plan. Maybe you wanted to text your mum, maybe you wanted to check the weather, maybe you wanted to start the kettle. Instead, you've absorbed 4 unrelated micro-dramas: someone's skincare fail, a dog in a beekeeper suit, a 5-word political slogan superimposed over a clip of a streamer rage quitting Minecraft, and the original impulse has evaporated like breath on a cold window. That moment, repeated hundreds of times a week, is the texture of brain rot, a quiet subtraction of executive function so incremental you don't notice the account draining until you try to read an entire page of a novel and discover, to your embarrassment, that the words skate off your mind like raindrops on wax. I'm not talking about moral failure. I'm talking about engineered environments. The platforms know your neurochemistry better than you do. They know that intermittent rewards, likes, comments, the next autoplay drip dopamine in a pattern that keeps the limbic system quietly simmering. They know that novelty, outrage, and cuteness are levers you cannot help but pull. And they know that the longer they keep you in the trance, the more ad inventory they can serve. You aren't the customer. You're the crop being harvested. The subtle part is that the field looks like a playground. The colors are candy bright, the fonts are friendly, the jokes are fast and frictionless. The horror is that the playground is also a laboratory, and every slide, every swing, every sandbox has electrodes under the surface logging micro movements of your attention. When people say brain rot, they often picture a teenager who can't stop dabbing and speaks only in memes. But I see a 32-year-old copywriter who used to devour 500-page biographies and now finds herself rereading the same paragraph 3 times because halfway through she compulsively thumb swipes to Instagram, not even to post, just to see if anything new has appeared. I see a 60-year-old grandfather who used to wake at AM to write poetry before work and now loses entire mornings arguing with strangers in comment sections, heart pounding, adrenaline spiking over a headline he never even fact-checked. I see a 12-year-old whose language acquisition is being sculpted less by teachers or parents than by an algorithmic feed that maximizes watch time, so the child's inner monologue is colonized by the cadence of influencers selling sugar-free energy drinks. The rot is democratic. It crosses every demographic line, though it pulls deepest wherever loneliness, boredom, or anxiety already live. Let's linger on attention span, because that's the marker most of us feel first. Imagine attention as a flashlight beam. In childhood, the beam is wide and soft. It can rest on a single beetle crossing a sidewalk for 10 enchanted minutes. Over time, culture trains the beam to narrow and intensify, so that by adulthood you can drill an arrow into a spreadsheet without looking up. Brain rot is the beam snapping back to a strobe light, flicking from object to object so quickly that nothing ever receives sustained illumination. The result is a paradox. You feel hyper-stimulated yet undernourished, like you've eaten an entire bag of marshmallows and are somehow still starving. Your brain's predictive machinery, evolved to conserve energy, learns that depth is inefficient. Why sink resources into a 3,000-word investigative piece when the next tab promises a payoff in 6 seconds? The tragedy is that depth is where meaning lives. Depth is where empathy, creativity, and long-term memory consolidation happen. When depth becomes inaccessible, life flattens into a scroll. Memory problems follow. The hippocampus, that's seahorse-shaped librarian of the brain, decides what to file away based partly on emotional salience and partly on how richly an experience is encoded. A week spent hiking in the mountains with friends lodges in long-term storage because it's multisensory. The pine scent, the ache in your calves, the joke that made everyone laugh until someone snorted. A week spent binge-watching fragmented clips leaves almost no trace because each clip is emotionally loud but semantically thin. They overwrite one another like a palimpsest. You surface at a M with the hollow sense that time has passed but not accumulated. The calendar moved, but the biography didn't thicken. After enough cycles, you begin to distrust your own recall. Did I read that article yesterday or just the headline? Did I message her back or did I merely imagine it while scrolling? The ground turns to sand. Mental fogginess is the subjective echo of those neurological shifts. It's the cotton wool feeling behind the forehead when you try to plan a week ahead and the variables won't hold still. It's the sense that your inner dialogue has been replaced by a chorus of notifications, none of them your own. Anxiety, especially the low-grade, hummingbird variety, flutters around the edges because the brain knows, on some prehistoric level, that it is being hijacked. Every time you break away from the feed, you experience a micro-withdrawal, a spike of cortisol, a phantom vibration in the pocket, an urge to check just one more thing. The device becomes an externalized amygdala, always scanning for threats and rewards, and you begin to outsource vigilance to it. The result is a weird inversion. The tool that was supposed to serve your memory now holds it hostage. You feel unsafe without the very thing that is making you unwell. Doom scrolling deserves its own paragraph because it masquerades as civic engagement. You tell yourself you're staying informed, that anxiety is the price of vigilance, but the algorithmic curation of disaster is not education. It's a cortisol slot machine. Each new outrage is another coin, and occasional jackpot's an op-ed that vindicates your worldview, a viral clip that proves the other side hypocritical keep you pulling the lever. Over time, the nervous system is recalibrated. Ordinary life feels dull, almost suspect, because it lacks the neon urgency of the feed. The offline world where change is slow, nuanced, and mostly local can't compete with the hyperreality of trending hashtags. So you drift back to the timeline, chasing another hit of significance. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, exhausted by moral panic, loses the stamina it needs for the boring, granular work of actual citizenship, attending town halls, reading policy papers, knocking on doors. The social impact is quieter but corrosive. Conversation, the oldest technology of intimacy, requires a tolerance for pauses, for subtext, for stories that meander before they land. When attention is fragmented, those rhythms feel intolerable. You catch yourself scanning the face of the person across from you the way you once scanned thumbnails. Is this going somewhere? Is there a quicker payoff? Eye contact becomes a loading screen. You half listen while composing a clever reply in your head, already rehearsing how you'll phrase it for the group chat later. The irony is that you crave connection more than ever. Loneliness is the raw wound the platforms promise to salve, but the medium you use to seek it out erodes the very skills that make connection possible. Friendships become asynchronous performance. Empathy is flattened into emoji. Conflict, stripped of vocal tone and body language, mutates into flame wars. Over the long arc, the social fabric doesn't tear with drama. It frays thread by thread. Until one day you realize you don't know how to be bored in someone else's presence without reaching for your phone, and that is a kind of exile. Now let's zoom out. The phrase brain rot is useful precisely because it is unscientific. It gives people a folk diagnosis for a constellation of symptoms that medicine hasn't yet organized into a tidy code. It says, something is happening to us and we feel it in our skulls. Still, the absence of an ICD label doesn't mean the phenomenon is imaginary. Functional MRI studies show reduced resting state connectivity and attention networks after heavy social media use. EEG research finds that adolescents who consume short-form video for more than 3 hours a day exhibit altered theta and beta wave patterns associated with distractibility. Dopamine transporter density, the molecular machinery of reward, shifts in ways that parallel early-stage behavioral addiction. None of these findings are deterministic. Genes, socioeconomic stress, sleep quality, and offline relationships all modulate outcomes. But the preponderance of evidence points in one direction. The medium is not neutral. It sculpts neural architecture. The way rivers sculpt canyons, slowly but inexorably, the platforms themselves are beginning to acknowledge this, though in the performative language of corporate responsibility. They roll out dashboards that tell you your screen time, as if quantifying the damage absolves the dealer. They introduce take a break pop-ups that can be dismissed with a single tap, a gesture as meaningful as a casino posting flyers about gambling addiction next to the slot machines. Meanwhile, their algorithms continue to optimize for engagement because engagement is the blood that keeps the share price alive. The contradiction is baked into the business model growth requires. Capturing scarce human attention, but human attention is a finite resource that collapses when overexploited. The long-term solution would be to rebuild the incentive structure to reward healthier patterns of use, but that would mean smaller quarterly profits, and fiduciary duty still outranks moral duty. So the burden of remediation falls, once again, on the individual user who is least equipped to resist the environment that surrounds her. Let's resist the temptation to romanticize the PRE digital past. People have always had ways of numbing themselves: gin, pulp novels, television, solitaire on Windows 95. The difference is speed and scale. Never before has a stimulus stream been so personalized, so frictionless, so omnipresent. The smartphone is the first object in human history that is at once map, mirror, stage, and drug. It slips into bed with you, rides the bus with you, waits outside the shower in case someone needs you. It is the last thing you touch at night and the first thing you reach for in the morning. That intimacy creates a fusion of identity and device that no prior technology achieved. When you misplace your phone, you don't just feel inconvenience, you feel amputated. The thought of leaving it at home triggers the same low-grade panic you might feel leaving a toddler alone in a parking lot. This isn't addiction in the old, moralistic sense. It's CO dependence. The phone becomes an extension of the nervous system, and the algorithm becomes a shadow self, whispering desires you mistake for your own. Now let's talk about the kids. Because every conversation about brain rot eventually arrives at the shoreline of generational despair. A child born in 2012 has never known a world without on-demand touchscreens. Her first games were swiping digital fruit. Her bedtime stories were YouTube compilations of adults opening toys. By middle school, she's fluent in the grammar of memes, but shaky at reading facial expressions in 3 dimensions. Her hobbies are curated by the algorithm: slime videos, Roblox role plays, ASMR mukbang. Each is harmless in isolation. Together they form a curriculum that trains the brain for novelty, spectacle, and instant feedback while neglecting the slower virtues: patience, sustained reading, imaginative play that isn't scaffolded by PRE-rendered graphics. Teachers report that it's harder each year to hold collective attention for the length of a poem. Parents describe dinner table silence as punctuated only by notification pings. Pediatricians see an uptick in myopia, sleep disorders, and generalized anxiety. The kids themselves articulate the problem with heartbreaking clarity. "I feel like I'm watching my life through a screen," one 13-year-old told me. "Even when I'm not on my phone, I'm thinking about what's happening on it." That is the definition of haunted, but I promise to talk to you directly, so let me confess my own complicity. I have written these paragraphs in 15-minute bursts between checking headlines because even knowing everything I know, the reflex is still there. I have gone to the bathroom with my phone in hand, scrolling while urinating, an act so absurd that if an alien observed it, they would think the device was a dialysis machine for the soul. I have felt the twinge of FOMO when I delete Twitter and the phantom buzz in my pocket when the phone is actually on the dresser. I have snapped at loved ones who interrupted a video I wasn't even enjoying. I have stayed up 3 hours past bedtime chasing threads about topics I don't care about until my eyes burned and my dreams were populated by captions. I tell you this not to flaunt self-awareness, but to underline that the architecture of persuasion is stronger than individual willpower. Shame is a useless response. What we need is structural repair. So let's talk repair, and let's be honest, the personal fixes are partial and exhausting, but they're still worth doing. Start with the simplest lever: friction. Make the phone slightly harder to reach. Charge it outside the bedroom, in a drawer, with a long cable so you have to stand up. Buy an analog alarm clock, because the morning grab is the most habituated moment. Change the display to grayscale. Color is the first hook, and a monochrome screen feels less like a carnival. Remove infinity scroll apps from the home screen and bury them 3 swipes deep in a folder labeled Time Sync. These are tiny speed bumps, but the unconscious is lazy. Even a 2-second delay can break the trance often enough to matter. Next, curate the content itself. Unfollow accounts that leave you feeling depleted. Follow ones that stretch your mind or feed your spirit. Treat your feed like a diet. You wouldn't keep potato chips on the counter if you were trying to eat more vegetables. The algorithm will adapt faster than you expect. Within 2 weeks, the recommendations will tilt toward whatever you engage with most deeply. Use that plasticity for good. When you do post, write longer captions, ask real questions, start conversations that require more than emoji replies. These small acts of resistance train the system to value depth, and they train your own brain that depth still yields rewards. Replace, don't just restrict. The nervous system abhors a vacuum. If you subtract 3 hours of scrolling, you must add 3 hours of something else, or the craving will reassert itself. Pick activities that hit the same neurochemical buttons but in healthier ways. Rhythm games like drumming or dancing give pattern novelty. Rock climbing gives incremental challenge and social bonding. Board games give narrative payoff. Volunteering gives purpose and oxytocin. Physical exertion is especially potent because it metabolizes the stress hormones that accumulate during doom scrolling. You don't have to become a triathlete. A 20-minute walk without earbuds is enough to reset the default mode network, the constellation of brain regions that lights up during self-reflection. Reclaim boredom. Boredom is not the enemy. It's the crucible of creativity. When every micro moment is filled with input, the subconscious has no space to recombine memories into new ideas. Try micro boredom first. Stand in line at the grocery store without checking your phone. Let the mind wander. Notice the weird choreography of strangers navigating carts, the fluorescent hum above the freezer aisle. Full boredom is even richer. Take a weekend afternoon, put the phone in airplane mode, and forbid yourself any media. The first hour feels like withdrawal. The second hour is when the mind, starved of novelty, begins to mine its own archives. You remember dreams you forgot you had. You hatch solutions to problems that felt intractable. You feel, for the first time in weeks, like a subject rather than an object. Cultivate attentional anchors. Pick one ritual a day that is screen-free and non-negotiable. Morning coffee on the porch, evening journaling by candlelight, a lunchtime. Sandwich eaten while staring out a window. These anchors act like stakes in the ground. They remind the nervous system that not every moment is for sale. Over time, they become islands of sanity, and the islands grow. Eventually, you string them together into archipelagos of deep time, address the root anxieties. Much of compulsive scrolling is self-medication for loneliness, uncertainty, or existential dread. If you medicate with media alone, the symptoms return. Therapy helps, but so does community. Join a choir, a hiking club, a local political campaign, anything with regular face-to-face meetings and a shared goal. The antidote to algorithmic echo chambers isn't silence. It's richer, more diverse conversation. When your social cup is full, the feed loses its desperate urgency. Advocate for systemic change. Individual choices matter, but they're insufficient against trillion-dollar incentives. Support legislation that forces platforms to disclose engagement-maximizing features. Encourage schools to teach media literacy as a core subject, not an elective. Push for open-source algorithms so that researchers can audit the psychological impacts. If you work in tech, agitate from within for ethical design. If you don't, vote with your wallet, pay for ad-free services. Crowdfund platforms that respect user well-being. Cultural shift starts small: seat belts, smoking bans, recycling, but once they tip, they become the new normal. And finally, be gentle with yourself. The goal is not monastic purity, it's sustainable balance. You will relapse. You will install an app you deleted, stay up too late one night, snap at a friend who interrupts your scroll. Each relapse is data, not defeat. Notice it, log it, adjust the speed bumps, move on. Healing is not linear. It's a spiral staircase where each loop brings you slightly higher. The fact that you're even worried about brain rot means your observer mind is still intact. That is cause for hope. I want to end with a small exercise you can do right now, not because it will fix everything, but because it will prove that agency still exists. Close your eyes for 30 seconds and picture the last time you felt fully present. Maybe it was holding a pet, or standing in the surf, or laughing so hard your ribs hurt. Notice the bodily sensations of that memory, the temperature, the muscle tone, the rhythm of breath. Now open your eyes and realize that the hardware for that experience is still inside you. It hasn't atrophied. It's just been crowded out. The feed wants you to believe that attention is scarce, But attention is also a renewable resource, like love or sunlight. Every time you choose depth over skim, you water the seed of your own mind. And seeds, given enough tending, will break. Concrete.so let's make a quiet pact, you and I. The next time we feel the itch to scroll, we'll pause for one conscious breath. In that breath, we'll ask, what do I really need right now? Sometimes the answer will be connection, sometimes distraction, sometimes rest. Whatever it is, we'll try to meet the need directly rather than outsourcing it to an algorithm that profits from our fragmentation. We'll fail sometimes, and that's okay. The point is to keep practicing, to keep remembering that the mind is not a hard drive whose sectors are irreversibly corrupted. It's a living ecosystem that can heal. If we stop pouring poison into the river, I'll go first. I'm turning my phone off for the rest of the night, and I'm going to sit on the back steps and listen to the cicadas. There's a meteor shower predicted if the clouds cooperate. I might miss a meme, an outrage cycle, a DM, but I'll gain a pocket of sky, and in that sky, a few burning grains of cosmic dust will trace arcs of silent light. The feed can't monetize that. It belongs entirely to me.